Okay. There's nothing that like indicates. Oh, never mind. I can see now. There's an audio bar below me. Cool. No, I can't hear you though. You gotta.
Shit. Yeah, can you hear me now? My bad. My
Oh
bad.
yeah. There you
Yeah, I'm right about to start. Gonna do the interview, and we should be good to go.
Hold on.
Okay.
Actually, hold on. Let me rejoin really quick. I'm not sure. Hold on. Are you hearing this?
Everyone else can hear us too, so I'm gonna have to cut it soon.
Oh wait. Are you streaming right now?
No, but it's at the title screen, but apparently they can hear, so it's
Okay,
all good.
cool.
I can hear you, buddy. Welcome to the show. Again, I am lucky to be able to have this opportunity to talk to some absolutely wonderful people tonight. And again, I was able to find somebody from the Japanese game industry. I never thought I'd be able to find anybody from there who'd be willing to talk, and I was lucky to find two people in a row. Hello, everybody. Thank you for showing up tonight. So anyway, without further ado, let me bring on our guest, Max Ma, or Max Millionaire on his Twitter tag. Or
Alright.
he's also Sheekin on Twitter. So everybody, give a big welcome to him. It's good to see you here. Thank you for stopping by.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a little bit early. I interviewed somebody at the same time last week, so thank you for taking time out of your morning to sit down and talk and answer some hopefully important questions. So
Not, nothing I. Nothing I say could possibly be of any importance, but yes, thank you so much for having me on anyway.
okay, well we'll let the audience be the judge of that, I suppose. So I guess I start out with every guest on here. So can you give a little background of yourself? So what do you do? What do you describe? How would you describe your role within the Japanese gaming industry and what you are responsible for?
Okay. I would say my role, I guess, is I'm an in-house game localizer,
Mm-hmm.
and so that means I'm generally on retainer, if you will, for a Japanese game company. I can't name which one because of NDA and weird Japanese gaming industry reasons, but
Right.
if we start talking about the games I've worked on, you could probably guess, but I'm technically not allowed to say where I work.
You can't. Okay, so you can't say where you worked, but you could say what you worked on. Correct?
Right, I can say what games I've been credited on. That's about it. But
Okay.
yeah,
What?
that
What?
means I work on like just yeah any ongoing projects that my company has going on.
Okay. So what games have you worked on then? Can you give some names?
Sure. The biggest game I've been credited on is Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, which
Okay.
is the Arc Systems Works fighting game that came out, I think,
Oh, that's cool.
a year ago, a year and a half ago now. Wow, it's been that long.
It's been yeah.
Um, and that was a great project to work on since I kind of have a background in fighting games, and it kind of fell kind of into place for me. I was like, oh, this is my this is my favorite thing, and I get to work on my favorite thing. So this is yeah, this is my area of expertise, and I got to use a lot of my fighting game knowledge and just kind of all the like stuff I picked up over the years of playing them in the localization of this game. And I was really excited that I got to actually like put this once I thought useless the real world skill to an actual professional use, and that was really cool.
That must have been yeah, that must be amazing. And I every time I talk to any guests on here, I always bring up like it must seem like a really cool job to tell people like I work with video games for a living. That's how I make my living and stuff like that. I always thought that was a really cool way to bring that up. So I guess the next question I have is how did you get started in this industry? Was this something you always wanted to do? Is this something that you just sort of found your way towards? How did it happen?
This is kind of it's a bit of a long story, maybe, but sure. I think it was maybe in 2014,
Mm-hmm.
2015. No, sorry. What happened was I originally came to Japan just as an English teacher because that's generally the easiest way to get your foot in the door or the foot in the country, if
Mm-hmm.
you will. And I was teaching English for a few years, and I was like, after about 2 years of it, I was like, all right, so this isn't gonna really go anywhere for me career wise. I could just keep doing this for a while and then come back to the States, and then look for another job where I can actually employ my Japanese skills somewhere. Um, oh, sorry, I should have explained that first. I majored in Japanese in university,
Okay.
and I've always wanted to do a job where I could use my Japanese skills. And so, being an English teacher in Japan, that was fun, but I didn't really get to use that much Japanese. And so I was hoping I could maybe
Okay.
like look for a job in Tokyo or something where I could actually, speak and use Japanese with people. And
Mm-hmm.
I got lucky and I found a job at it was like a proxy website for people that wanted to purchase like items off of Mercari or Yahoo Auctions Japan from overseas, but didn't have a means of doing so because a lot of sellers don't sell outside of Japan.
Right.
And so that's where the proxy service steps in to like kind of purchase it on your behalf and send it to you for a fee. And so that job involved a lot of copywriting and research and kind of promotion of Japanese goods and Japanese e-commerce essentially. So just kind of promoting a lot of stuff that I was already really into, like kind of Japanese streetwear and Japanese
Right.
game memorabilia, like the
Right.
type of stuff that people would want to import from Japan. And I was like, hey, this is stuff I would like to buy too. So it was really cool to kind of be on the other end of that
Right.
and kind of see what people were buying and what hobbies they were into. But anyway, I really did enjoy that job, but there were some things that I wasn't really happy with on the professional side of things. I wanted to get a lot more things started at the company, which didn't really pan out because they were just kind of lacking on resources. And so it felt a bit stagnant at times, career wise. And so at that point, I was like, all right, I really do like what I'm doing here, but professionally, what do I really, really want to do? And I remembered, I was like, oh, yeah, well, the one thing I'm actually really passionate about is video games.
Mm.
And so, all right. So I guess I'll make it my goal to find a job in the game industry somehow. And I applied for a whole bunch of companies, like most of the main Japanese ones, like Konami, Square Enix, or whatever.
Right.
And I don't know. I just got lucky, I guess. I was in the right place at the right time. The company I'm working at right now was kind of really growing rapidly at the time, and they needed new translators, a whole bunch of them. And I just happened to get picked up, and I've been there ever since.
That's awesome. So, what does your typical day to day look like then? Like, what's a typical day look like in your world of the 9 to 5, so to speak?
I say I work in the game industry, but I really work in the Microsoft Excel industry. You're just opening,
Mm.
just opening a spreadsheet and just going to town, really.
That's a very transferable skill. I think a lot of people don't credit. So I've noticed because I've had other localizers on here as well, and it seems like translation and localization often get kind of confused or mixed up with one another. So, like, what are the differences between the two, or do they kind of cross over?
They're the same thing.
They are the same thing. Okay.
Yeah. If anyone tells you they're different, they uh it's a huge point of discourse, honestly, for a lot of people, especially
Really?
in
Okay.
Twitter sphere. But a lot of
Of course.
translators or
Right.
localizers will tell you that translation is localization is translation. There's no way you can actually translate text without having to somewhat localize it in a way. I mean, there's sometimes there's a word for a thing,
Hmm.
and that you can say in Japanese, you can say the word for it in English, but when you go beyond just translating simple words and phrases, you're going to localize, and that's unavoidable. It's a fact. And to what degree that you localize it, a sentence or some dialogue might differ between translators, but there are a lot of people in like the anti-localization crowd, perhaps, that
Hmm.
don't like it when certain terms get translated in certain ways, and they say localization isn't good for translation. They only want straight translation. They don't know what they're talking about.
I could agree.
Localization is translation, and you might not agree with the translator's decision, and that's perfectly fine. But when someone says something like, "I don't like localization, I only like translated text," they don't know what they're talking about.
Interesting. Okay. So when it comes to obviously having to change some things depending on the language, Like whose decision is that? Like, is it up to the individual? Is it up to like a team, or the writers, or who's involved when the translation slash localization happens?
It really depends on the type of project you're working on. Sometimes it's completely up to a translator, and maybe like one editor will take a look at it at the end and then just kind of check it. But
Hmm.
like for example, I know some people in the manga translation industry, and sometimes they're just on their own. It's just the publisher and them, and
Interesting. Okay.
so their trust is completely put into that one translator to
Ooh.
like just do the work and maybe like of course the Japanese publisher will look at the text once it's been translated, and some of them will be more nosy than others,
Hmm.
and some Japanese publishers might even try to correct the translator's English, and that's always really funny.
That's interesting.
Yeah, but in my case, it goes through a translator. I'm an in-house translator at my company, and so it goes through the translator first, and then it goes to an editor.
Hmm.
Editor checks it, and then the translator checks what the editor checked, and then it goes to a Japanese coordinator to check the whole process in the final product to make sure
Uh-huh.
everything's ship shape and okay. And so it's a bit of an involved process, but mostly it's up to the translator to decide to make the final call on things. So like even if the translator wrote something and the editor says, "Well, I think it would sound better if it was like this," the translator, at least where I'm at, can say, "You know what? Nah, your suggestion was good, but I like mine better, so I'm gonna switch it back to what I wrote originally."
So you
But
have
at
more.
the end, the
Okay.
coordinator will see what happened and be like, "Okay, you decided not to go with this editor's changes, and you know
Hmm.
what? That's okay." And they can still just kind of push forward with that.
See, that's really cool because I feel like if you had a really story heavy game or a very dialogue heavy game, there'd be a lot of pressure, I would imagine, to maintain to be faithful, at the same time, but then change it enough, to identify with whatever audience you're translating it for. I guess the example I think of is like the Paper Mario games. And the
Oh my god,
translation on the
yes,
like
they're
okay,
so good.
so are they close to the original? Do you know if they're close to the original Japanese translation, or are there liberties taken, or is it kind of a
I
mix of
actually
everything?
recently played the Origami King, which was an incredibly well written and fantastic overall game. But a lot of things, I mean, were changed from the Japanese to the English for the better,
Hmm.
in my opinion. So a lot of, I mean, a lot of purists might not like it, but if games like that, they add a lot of humor and like jokes that weren't in the original. And sorry, what was the question again? I was just thinking about how good Paper Mario was.
Oh, that's easy to get distracted. That's easy to get distracted by. No, the question is like for a game that's very story intensive. I feel like it's a lot of pressure. It would be a lot of pressure to maintain like faithfulness on, the original game, and then at the same time maintaining, a level of understanding and connection with the characters and the dialogue for whatever language you're translating it to. Is there ever like have you ever heard anybody express like this is oh my god, it's all resting on my shoulders, like I gotta make it sound right. I imagine that there's a lot of pressure right there.
um, Yeah, for sure. Especially for some characters that are really beloved in the Japanese versions. It's like, oh man, I have to work on the English version of this character. Oh
Mm,
my god, if I screw up one thing, the fans are gonna rip me apart.
right, right.
And so, but the thing is, like, at least on the team that I work with, like everyone, it's just full of incredibly talented and skilled writers that are really good at their craft.
Mm,
And so they feel the pressure, but I don't know. I feel like they deliver, and so the pressure is felt, and definitely, at the end of the day, there will always be people that aren't 100% satisfied with what you do, and
that's
that's,
fair.
it is what it is. But I think for the most part, we do feel that pressure, but at the same time, I think we deliver at least from the feedback I've seen so far, a consistent or good enough product that most fans are really happy with what we do, and that really keeps us going. Actually, like you'd be surprised, and maybe not so surprised, at how often we check Twitter to see like people's reactions
That
to what
was
we
gonna be my
wrote.
next question. Like, how often do you pay attention to like Twitter, Reddit, YouTube comments, whatever, of like games and characters and stuff? Is it something you really follow, obviously, or is it something you're just like, I don't really care what they say. I'm doing, what I want to do.
It's definitely something I maybe check a little bit more than I should, perhaps.
Gotcha.
But it's yeah, it's mostly positive feedback, and that always it's really motivating, honestly, to like see someone like the other day I saw a it was a Japanese comment actually on something I on a voice that I directed
Hmm.
and cast for a certain character in a game. And the official account of the game tweeted about it, and a Japanese person retweeted saying like, "Wow, the English version is so cool. You know, I think I prefer this over the Japanese version." And I was like, "Oh,
Wow,
that's really high praise."
that's a huge
Like
compliment
that,
right there.
yeah, I was really it made me really happy with what I worked with, and because that was kind of like my entire creative process. Like I wrote the English, I chose the person to voice them in English, and then I directed the person to voice during the voicing session. So I felt really kind of attached to this little project, and to kind of get that comment at the end was kind of like, yeah, all right, I didn't do so bad there, I guess.
So you chose the voice actor for. Is that like a common thing for a translator? They get to choose the voice actors for a game, or does it depend?
I think for in-house translation teams, it depends on like the company you work for, obviously, but for many in-house translation teams, yeah, we are involved with the casting process and
Cool.
directing process as well.
Okay. So are you allowed to say like any voice actors you've worked with then, like by name, or is that an NDA?
I can definitely. I've worked with Kira Buckland, who is she did 2B in Near Automata.
Oh, okay.
I've
Yeah.
worked with Faye Mata. She's worked in League of Legends, and
Hmm.
I've worked with who else have I worked with? So many people. Sorry, I can't
No, no,
think of
it's
any
fine.
names at the
Those are
moment.
two obviously very big names right there. That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, oh, I worked with what's his name? Well, I'm just blanking on names right now. Like I can see their faces and hear their voices in my head right now, but I can't bring up their
They're just
names.
popping in. They're like, Max, remember my name.
If anything, remember my name.
Yeah.
Um, who else have I worked with? Hmm. You know, if I could just bring up a list right now, if when
Yeah, no, it's
hold on,
it's
give me 1 second.
yeah, no, it's fine. It's fine.
Oh, what was Sean Chiplock?
Oh,
Who
okay, cool.
is he's in everything. Yeesh.
Yeah.
I don't even know where to begin with his credits, but oh, I guess he was Kai in Guilty Gear. That's a recent thing he's worked on,
That's
and
cool.
yeah, I've worked with the voice actress for Yuffie in Final Fantasy VII,
Oh,
Susie
cool.
Young.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so just basically, if you work in voice directing in the current game industry,
Mhm.
it's generally like I don't want to say it's the same people, but it is a pool of um, people that you often see in most games. Like um, maybe I mean you know there is a large pool of talent in the voice acting industry right now, but I feel like a lot, maybe like the same 50-ish people
Uh-huh.
show up in most games. And so if you're working in the voice acting industry, it's a bit of a smaller network than you might imagine.
Is there a reason why? Is it like a union issue or a contract thing, or is it just that's everybody knows their voice and they fit the role, you know?
I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that a lot of these people, it's kind of momentum based. I think
Mhm.
if you've got your name in a couple of big titles, more people want to work with you.
That makes sense.
So like even when I'm in the casting process, I'm like, oh yeah, this person's really good. Oh, and they've also worked on this, and this. That means they must be really good. Okay, I think I want to work with him for this project because I'm confident that they'll have the skill and talent to deliver a good product at the end because they worked on all these titles, and it just kind of snowballs from there, right? Because I just
Right.
gave them another title, then other people are gonna see that and be like, oh, they worked on this title as well. All right, and I'm gonna hire them. And so once I think once it rains, it pours for these voice actors. It's either feast or famine, though, for sure.
I can
It
imagine
is
that,
a
yeah.
very competitive industry, and people, yeah, there are tons and tons of people that want to get in this industry as well. Like I remember once I had a voice actor tag me in a thing. They weren't supposed to, but they
Mm.
tagged me in a tweet, and I just got a whole bunch of voice actors following me out of
Oh
nowhere.
shit.
And I was like, oh no, you don't want to follow me. All I do is like I just shit post about Guilty Gear. Like, uh oh.
I could I could talk Guilty Gear. I could I could say
It's like
Guilty Gear.
you're in for disappointment. I'm not gonna post about voice acting or like anything here.
Right.
But yeah.
So my I guess another question I have with that is you obviously have a lot of freedom and say so in like choosing the writing and the translation and the voice actor, but how much like say does like the the main developer or the director of the game have? I guess a good example is in Japan, Hideo Kojima, like they said, he's very peculiar about like who voices the Japanese voice actors and the English voice actors, and he has his hands in everything. But is that just like a normal thing for somebody at that level? Or is that like an abnormal? Is he sort of an outlier there? Like how much do you work with other people? I guess.
Oh yeah, Kojima definitely would be an outlier here for sure.
Right.
It's a little bit. It's usually a bit more hands off from the Japanese end of things. As long as the English fans are happy, then the Japanese developers are happy for the most part. But
Okay.
sometimes a director will be like, "Oh, I insist that we use this person to voice this character," and we'll have to go with their decision even if we don't agree with it because they're
Interesting.
the director, right?
Right.
And so yeah, most of the time it's left to us, but sometimes the producer or the director would be like, "Oh, I want this person to voice this character, or I want this person to sound like this," and it's like, "All right, you're the boss," and we'll just go with their decision because their decision overrides, basically the entire process.
Has there ever been an opposite effect? Has a an English translation or like maybe a Spanish VO or an English VO ever had an effect on the Japanese VO? Like have fans ever said they're like, I like how this sounds, let's change the actor, or let's change it to make him sound more like this? Like obviously like I hate to keep bringing up Metal Gear, but like Solid Snake, the original, like has a very distinct voice, for example,
Right.
and like Halo, for whatever, he has a very distinct voice, even though he speaks very little. Has there ever been a case where like that voice is so recognizable it comes back to the Japanese side and they say, we could make him sound more like this, or is it pretty distinct what a Japanese audience wants versus say, a Western audience, for example, with voices?
With voices, you know what? I'm not 100% sure if there has been, at least in my case personally, if there has been anything like that happening. I don't think I've been told,
Okay.
but it's definitely plausible. And but one thing I can say is sometimes when text is localized a certain way, like a naming convention for like a certain, let's say, like skill or something,
Mm.
or just the way a character talks in their written text, not so much their voice.
Mm.
The Japanese might pick up on that, like, oh, you guys did a cool thing there. You know what? We're gonna yoink and kind of put that
Oh, I
in our
gotcha.
version as well, or like
Mm.
maybe how we name the character. It's like, oh, that's a cool way to name a character. We're gonna do that too, and then we see it, and it's like, oh, okay, cool. You took that, and now we have to write a way around that because you took you took what we had in English and put it in the Japanese, which was our English was different than the Japanese in the first place, and now
Right,
you took
right.
that and now we have to translate the new text you put, which is the text that you took from us.
So thanks.
um, yeah,
Thanks, I guess. um,
it happens.
so I guess that's a good way to kind of transition into my next question then. With the back and forth on there, have you ever has negative feedback ever caused you to change like translation or voice acting? If people just say, I can't stand his or her voice, or I can't stand the way this is written, does that factor into anything, or is it pretty much a like, well, we this is what I decide is best and it's going to go that way?
Um, I try to look for negative feedback. I honestly do. But
Fair enough, yeah.
whenever there is negative feedback, it's usually either something that I agree with,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe I wasn't involved with so much, and they don't understand that it was kind of something out of our control.
Mm-hmm.
And like, if for example, I there was someone on Twitter that once kind of went on a small tirade or whatever about like how certain skill text was translated in a certain game I worked on.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing was, they were upset because oh, are we? Can you still hear me? Sorry.
Yeah, I can see you.
Okay. They were upset because the English text had left out so much information,
Mm.
and what they didn't realize was with the um, text box constraints we were working with originally, we didn't have room to put in all the information from the Japanese to
Interesting.
English because there was a character limit,
Mm-hmm.
and we were forced to remove some information because it wouldn't fit
That's
into the
interesting.
boxes that we had. And so they were like, oh, they removed all this information and, they're not a real translation. And I was like, yo, we originally did have the whole thing translated, but we had to like cut like 50% of it
Oh,
because it didn't
right,
fit in the
right.
box.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really silly because after the fact, the font size got changed so
Uh-huh.
it would fit in the
Uh,
box. But the
wow.
text had been cut.
Yeah, yeah.
And then so it comes out and it's like, why didn't they fit in all the text? They had all this room here. And I was like, we didn't have all the room originally.
Oh. Well, that was a question that was actually brought up last week. Like somebody said, does text size have like how does that differ between Japanese and English? Like who decides that? Does that fall the translator? Like what how big the text is, how big the font is? Does that who does that fall on, or is it a little bit of a back and forth?
So I'm really lucky. I work in-house. So that means I get a kind of a direct line to the dev team.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas most people in the industry are freelancers and they just kind of have to deal with the constraints that they're presented with.
Mm.
So I can be annoying and contact my coordinator and be like, "Hey, I can't work with this. Tell the devs to like give me another line of like so a line of text here so I can fit more stuff in."
Right.
Um, and so for most of the projects that I've worked on, I've either had to either the text box constraints haven't been too bad, or I've been able to contact let the dev team know that hey, this font does not fit, or it's too big, or I don't have enough space here, and they can either provide a smaller font or give us more text room to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been really lucky that way because a lot of translators they just have to. Well, I guess I only have 3 lines here. I got to work with this, and they
Gotcha.
are wizards. They're honestly wizards because they're able to really just take that whole paragraph of Japanese text. And the way Japanese works is you can fit so much information into one character,
True. Yeah.
right? Just one kanji can mean, a whole word, and then you can just fill this a whole paragraph of text in like just maybe 30 characters over 3 lines or something.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in English, that's like no, that's like room for one sentence. Like I don't have enough room here to convey
Right.
all that information in this tiny text box. But a lot of the translators that I've seen that I've worked with or that I see on Twitter, they do incredible work with the constraints that they're given. And I'm like, I don't like as a spoiled in-house translator, I I couldn't possibly see myself working like that. But yeah, you guys are real MVPs, I
they
guess.
they they work with what they got. I guess that's really cool. So I guess this is kind of an off-topic question, but I have to bring it up because I see it pop up with a couple of the guests that I've had. Um, why is it like in Japan you're not allowed to say what studio you work with? And I've heard several different answers for this. Where in like let's say I worked at like Sony Santa Monica or Naughty Dog, I could put on my Twitter profile like so and so at Naughty Dog, so and so at Santa Monica. Is there like why is there a difference there?
You know what? I think it's mostly because at least in my case, most people in the game industry here in Japan are contractors. And
Mm-hmm.
so they don't officially work for the company, even though they're in their office, working in their office, getting a full time salary. But technically, they're not like a salaried employee. So
Okay.
technically, I'm a contractor. I'm a contractor that gets a space in your office, and I get to participate in your company events and everything. But and that's like most of the industry is that. And so the thing is also I work in mostly mobile game translation as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so for a lot of mobile games, there are no credits. And so I think Because of that, they don't want people to know who works on this mobile game, which is kind of a weird thing. I think it's changing though. A recent game, Near Reincarnation, has
Yeah.
it's a mobile game, but it has a credits page, which is really cool, and the translators are credited in it. But for most mobile games, there is no credits page, and so I think that plays a part in it. But I think also it's an artifact of this kind of old Japanese game company culture, which was, back in the 90s, they didn't want people to reveal their real names, even in the credits of a console game,
Right, right.
because they didn't want rival companies to like poach their employees.
Like Yuki Chan's Papa and stuff like
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think now it's really just a control thing.
Mm-hmm.
And in case I go on some kind of weird tirade on Twitter or something, they don't want to be associated with
Oh no.
me.
Gotcha.
And there is no like my opinion's my own thing equivalent in Japanese Twitter from what I see. So
Interesting. Okay.
if someone like does something scandalous in the media or whatever, they don't want any part in being associated with that. And so I think it's not only the Japanese game industry, but this Japanese business culture in general as well.
I guess I always suspected that, but I wasn't sure. Japanese business culture and games are a business, so I suppose it kind of crosses over between the two. So I guess, and I ask this every time. Like, let's say, what would you recommend to somebody who wants to do your job? Like, what would they do? What steps would they take? Is there a path to follow? Is there a right way? Is there a wrong way to go about it? Or is it just right place at a right time? Or what would you recommend to somebody watching who wants to follow this path?
Yeah, a little bit of A, a little bit of B there for sure. Like I
Mm-hmm.
was absolutely in the right place in the right time, and I will be completely upfront. There are probably tons of people that could do my job better than I can, to be
Oh
honest.
wow! Don't get mad at
But
me if your boss is watching this. Like, oh hey, you know what? He's right. He's right.
but yeah, I was in the right place in the right time, and I'm incredibly lucky that they let me, a person with no localization experience,
Mm-hmm.
work where I am now, because there are tons of people out there with much more storied credits than myself that are still looking for work in this industry. And
Mm-hmm.
so I feel incredibly blessed that I get to do what I do. But yeah, it definitely, I would say, I think the thing is like networking is extremely important. You'd be surprised at how small this industry is actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like once you kind of get in, you kind of know everybody and everyone knows you.
Interesting.
Like it's not that big. Like there are only so many Japanese games that get localized, and it's
Yeah.
generally
Right.
by like the same, like I don't know, same 50 people or so.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's not that big of a pool of people, to be honest. But so networking is extremely important. Like I know someone on Twitter. She's an incredibly talented person, but she was an inspiring localizer translator, and she joined a lot of discords and networked a lot with a lot of people in the industry. And now she is working at one of the most prominent localization companies in Tokyo.
That's
And
cool.
I just kind of watched that whole process and where she came from and where she is now. And I'm like, wow, that was she was dedicated, and yeah, she ended up finding a great position at a great company. And so, yeah, networking I think is extremely important
I
because
believe that.
most
Yeah.
people know most people, and so if you know the people and they know you, you're always going to be kind of there, like in their eye, in case they need people to work.
I think that's really inspiring actually. And every answer I've heard, I've never heard a thing like, well, no, it's not going to happen. I've heard like, yes, you can make it happen, but you just got to put in the work to make it happen. So that's really cool. So I let's move into a little bit more about you. We're going a little bit more in depth. Now, I know you said that like gaming is kind of your passion and video games are your passion, and you mentioned fighting games. I mean, is it kind of incredibly fortunate that you live in an area where you could technically walk a couple blocks or get on a train, and you could be at an arcade to play a fighting game like within the hour if you wanted to. Has that really enhanced your experience, or has that changed anything for you? I guess because like if you live in the states, like that's just simply not possible. You know that experience is completely different.
Right. Yeah, I'm really into Japanese arcade culture and Japanese arcade games. Especially fighting games, but also rhythm games and even like beat 'em ups and whatnot, and just
Mm.
yeah. It's really cool. I can within pretty quick access to a lot of legendary Japanese arcades like Mikado or Game Newton
Oh yeah.
or something. But I wouldn't say. I mean, especially as of recently, I wouldn't say
Right. Right.
it's been yeah, especially with the pandemic happening and a lot of arcades closing. I am really lucky that I get to go to these places, but I don't know. Maybe I'll just take it for granted at this point, but I do enjoy the fact that I can just kind of quickly just get on my bike and just go play GDR at any point of the day, or go to Mikado and play like a bunch of old like '90s beat 'em ups or whatever, shoot 'em ups.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's just something I take for granted at this point, and so right now it doesn't really seem that special or anything to me. It's like, oh yeah, it's always there, but it might not always be there.
So the obviously the pandemic has hit arcades and just probably like Japanese businesses in general like really hard. Has this changed how arcades function? Do you has this permanently put arcades out of commission? Because I've asked another guest and he says like some arcades may suffer from this, but overall he says I don't think arcades in general are going anywhere like anytime soon.
Mm, I'm not sure if I 100% agree with that notion.
Mm,
It's the reality is like most of them are closing down, and then most of them have been closing down. The pandemic has just kind of expedited that process, and there are definitely more closing than there are opening, and so I feel like in like about 10 years, perhaps it'll only be like the flagship or
that
like
yeah,
the
that's what he said. Like the flagships are going to be around.
yeah, you can't close like Mikado or anything like that. There's too much culture
Right.
and too much support for it. Like even like right now, Mikado. I keep bringing up Mikado. It's one of the bigger like retro arcades
Mm.
in Tokyo, and it's they're famous overseas, right?
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
um they had to resort to Kickstarter to staying afloat during the pandemic. But yeah, they got a ton of support, and a lot of it was from overseas. People had never set foot in Mikado. They were just donating money for the culture.
That's beautiful. It is the
Yeah,
culture. An arcade
yeah,
culture is just it always seemed to me like completely different than it's such a it's not something that you could like lump in with the PC gaming or like console gaming. It's its own unique niche and its own unique culture and its own unique experience that you just really, can't experience anymore. And I always thought that was really cool. So you mentioned like rhythm games. Are rhythm games still popular in Japan, like DDR, games like that?
I would say rhythm games are probably the money makers right now. For as I mean, with the exception of um the more casual friendly stuff. But I think a lot of people go to arcades now just to play rhythm games, right? Since that's kind of a hard thing to have at home.
Yeah,
And so, like, whereas fighting games and like other kind of old school games aren't really going to bring in a lot of money for arcades unless you're at a very specific location to play a very specific game.
right,
Um, Music games or rhythm games are generally what arcades are kind of relying on right now to kind of bring in consistent client base to come into the arcade and play. Otherwise, they would probably have a hard time staying open.
right. So are they when you say rhythm games, does that mean like it just has a casual audience then, or is it like a wide, like a mainstream audience? Because I know when rhythm games, even when they were at the peak in the U.S., I wouldn't go as far to say like they were like a mainstream, genre over here.
I can't speak for all arcades are all people, but I would say yeah, they definitely have a dedicated player base, and
Okay,
so like people they want to play their game, right? And so any place that has their game, they're gonna go. Like it doesn't matter anything
gotcha.
else. Like I want to play Drum Mania. Where's Drum Mania? Okay, this place has it. This place has it. All right, cool. I'm just gonna go to these places because they have Drum Mania.
Oh,
If you
okay.
don't have it, if you guys don't have it, I'm leaving. Like
That's
so
interesting.
it's really up to the arcades to have these arcades, or have these games. Otherwise, people aren't going to show up because they're just there to play one thing and one thing only.
So are they still is the Konami are they still making new DDRs and Beatmanias like editions every year still or
Oh yeah, for games like B-Mania or like Sound Voltex or Dance Dance Revolution, they are still getting consistently updated,
wow.
and yeah, people are still going into play. And it's these games are hard to play at home, especially like DDR.
Right.
I mean, I guess DDR in the West with larger houses would be easier to play with, just bigger houses and stuff. But for Japanese size houses, it's kind of hard to like kind of make space for that. And so, yeah, that's where arcades come into play.
Well, I mean, it would really suck too. I imagine like in a Japanese apartment to hear like stomping, like on the, stomping on the floor, and you're just like, little Shiichiro. I'm like, I swear to God, I'm like, he's at it, he's at it again, I suppose. So that's interesting then. So like, is because and Konami is everybody, everybody's mad at Konami. Konami's the devil over here because they ruined everything. But like they said, they must not be making any money. But like that's a misconception from my understanding. Like because they're still making money, obviously, and not just money, like decent money from like the rhythm games, from pachinko, and they have like clubs too, right? They have like health clubs or something.
Oh yeah, they're involved in all kinds of industries here, but yeah, even if I don't think the console gaming side is as big as most people outside of Japan might perceive it to be.
Right.
And so, yeah, losing Kojima and Metal Gear and whatnot might hurt, but I don't think it's going to hurt them as much as people may think.
Right. That's what I. It was one of those out of line, but he's right, type moments that you just had to
Right.
accept and swallow. So that's really interesting. So you're into rhythm games, you're into fighting games, you get to work in video games. Do you ever get a point where like you felt like your job has kind of taken away your enjoyment from video games? Like like you're just like I
Ooh.
worked all day. The last because even me like I don't do really anything with video games, but like if I'm at my PC all day, I'm just like the last thing I want to do is stay a couple more hours on my PC. I want to relax. I've worked all day. I'm done. Is it the same or is it a little bit different?
Uh, you know what? It is like I wouldn't say that it takes away from my enjoyment of games, but definitely I definitely look at games differently now. Like
Hmm.
you can't ever really turn off that. Like once you've seen behind the curtain, it's kind of like you can't really take that back.
That's fair.
And so a lot of the times, like even when playing a game, like I'll be constantly looking at the text
Hmm.
and seeing how they spelled words, what dictionaries they're using, their punctuation, and how they decided to localize a certain line. Like I can't turn that off in my brain.
Right.
And so like when I played Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, I played it in English at first, but I just kept focusing on how they translated certain words, and I was like, "Ooh, I wonder what the Japanese was for this." And I would go
Oh,
back, and you know how in Breath of the Wild, the only way you can change the language is if you restart the whole
you
game,
restart
you
the.
restart your whole
Oh my
console.
God! Did you
And
do
so
that?
every
That's
time I wanted to see like what the Japanese was, I would like switch. I would reset my console just so I could go back and play the line again and see it in Japanese. And I'd be like, "Oh wow, really interesting." And I would switch it back to English. And I got so tired of doing that. I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna play the game in Japanese, and so I don't have to think about how the
interesting.
localizer did it, and just think about how I would localize it, and then
Right.
just play it
Right.
that way.
Interesting. So on that note, I know there's a lot of games that make their way from Japan to like where I live at, like in America, and they find an audience and they gain fans. Is it the opposite in Japan? Like, do Western games make their way over to Japan and people like this is cool and like they develop fan bases or, followings or anything like that?
Sorry, I totally spaced out. Can you say that one more time?
Yeah, no, we don't have a lot of time, um, No, I like obviously like games like Near made their way to the U.S. and they found a big following over there and they developed a whole new group of fans who appreciated this game. Has that ever does that happen in Japan? Like, do games made in the West kind of make their way over to like Japan and Japanese gamers are just like, wow, I got this game, this American made game or is made in Santa Monica. It's really cool. I really like it and stuff like that. Does that happen or is it not as frequent?
Absolutely.
Really,
I would say one example that really sticks out to me is Undertale.
Undertale. Okay.
Yeah, Undertale really, really took hold here, and I think it's incredible actually how large the fan base for Undertale is in Japan. And they even had like orchestra concerts here performed by like the Japanese like video game
That's
orchestra in
cool.
Tokyo.
That's cool.
And yeah, I went to a few of their concerts actually, but yeah, it was huge here. And even before it came out officially, there was like a fan translation effort where basically the community translated the game through Google Sheets.
Really, really, they
Yeah,
took it upon them.
and
That's cool. That's
yeah,
cool.
and I remember recommending it to one of my friends, and I had her play it because
Mm,
I was also really into it at the time. I was like, oh my god, this game is so good. I need my friends to play this,
mm.
and so she played like the fan translated version of the game before it officially came out,
That's
before
cool.
8.4 officially translated it into Japanese, and they did a fantastic job with the Japanese localization as well. The person who translated it, Keiko,
Mm.
I forget her last name. She works on a whole bunch of other projects as well, and she's a really talented translator. And yeah, the Japanese localization was really fondly received. Um, but yeah,
So, do indie games in general, um, do they do well in Japan? Like Super Meat Boy or not Chris Tales, like Celeste or games like that. Do they make their way over or does it depend?
yeah, all these games generally tend to make their way over to Japan because the Japanese this market is really good for just games in general, and so a lot of indie devs try to get their games published in Japan on top of published in the West.
Mm,
And yeah, I think any indie devs' hopes would be that it would kind of take off like Undertale. Their game would take off like Undertale or something did, where
mm,
really kind of takes root in the Japanese community and has like kind of fosters a fan base here.
mm.
But that's kind of uh, a big ask, I think,
Right.
for to match a game like that.
I mean, that's
But
fair. Yeah, yeah. So, what about like AAA games then? Do they make their way over there or
oh, absolutely.
really?
But there wouldn't be. I guess it's not maybe the same as the West. Like certain games take hold that might be a bit surprising. Like here, for example, more than like Call of Duty, people play Rainbow Six. You know,
I can I could I can back that up. I like that. I like that already. I'm happier with that game than Call of Duty right now, but I digress. So,
right, right, or something like that, or like more than Fortnite, people played Apex, and people Apex is huge here. Like it's
really,
probably one of the biggest games, if not the biggest game
was
right now.
like Titanfall? Was that even a thing in Japan then or
If it was, I missed it.
interesting. Okay. Well, I mean that sounds like America too. Everybody forgot about it. But what's we have a question. What's the poster behind you?
Oh, it's not a poster actually; it's a wall scroll. It's an arcade wall scroll for Beatmania.
Beat Mania, there you go. I always thought Beat Mania had like these cool characters, and I remember you told me one time you're like, "Yeah, it's a music game," and I'm like, "Oh, that's that's cool." Like, yeah, that's really cool though. So I do have this question because one of my first guests on here, she worked with the Korean localization for Cyberpunk, and
Oh,
she
cool.
said like her team like actually won an award for like the Korean like dub for Cyberpunk and stuff like that. Did Cyberpunk make its way to Japan? Did it have a impact over there, or was it one of those like not really type of things?
If it definitely didn't get like there was no like hype machine for it
Uh huh.
um here as there was in the West perhaps, but
Right.
yeah, it definitely did get a Japanese localization. And I remember seeing a tweet where like the translator had like the script translated, and it was just like this stack of papers, like it
There's
was
a
just
yeah,
huge.
there's a lot of
And I was
dialogue
like,
in there.
oh my god, that's so much work. but I didn't really hear much about the game here after it came out, so
That's
I can't really
interesting.
say for sure. I mean, I know in the West they had a whole bunch of negative feedback and the whole fallout
Right.
after its initial release, but as far as the Japanese market, I'm not 100% sure. It might have been a little bit more slept on than it could have been.
Yeah, because she said too, like her example, her team worked on like Red Dead Redemption 2, and she said like they had to like all the horses have names in that game, but they're like like cowboy nick yeehaw cowboy nicknames to horses. It was like that was hard to translate. She's like, what does this even mean? Like why? I can't translate. What the hell is this and stuff? So PC like console gaming's really big in the West. PC gaming's really big over here too. I know mobile gaming is really big in Japan. So is console gaming a still major over there? Has PC gaming kind of caught up in Japan, or is it not quite? Like is Steam, things like that a big deal?
PC gaming has definitely grown in the last few years, like in ways that kind of surprised me actually.
Okay.
Because 5 years ago, I don't think we would have seen like a Japanese PC release for, let's say, like Guilty Gear Strive or something.
Uh-huh.
And now it's like, yeah, it's out and people are playing it. Like you can hop on the PC version here in Japan and find Japanese people to play with,
Oh
which
wow.
is
That's cool.
incredible. Because before, I don't think you'd be able to do that. You would have to buy the PS4 version or PS3 version or whatever to
Right.
find other Japanese people to play with.
Right.
But nowadays, I feel like it's more and more common for people to get into like PC gaming, and I think that's due to the rise of esports here, and everything's esports now in Japan. Like
Oh, really?
yeah, they're really trying to force it.
Interesting.
And, yeah, even like they put it in the titles of games, which is really weird to me. Like, let's say like Puyo Puyo Champions in
Uh-huh.
Japan, it's just called the little title of the game is called Puyo Puyo Esports, and
Really?
and like virtual fighter, I think Final Showdown or whatever, the
Yeah.
re-release of the last virtual fighter game is also called Virtual Fighter Esports.
That's it almost sounds like a parody, but it makes sense. I get that. I get that. So, what about like the new consoles? Like, can you find a PS5 in Japan, or is it like as hard to find over there as it is like everywhere else in the world?
Oof, I would say it's harder to find here than it is in the West.
Gotcha. Yeah, I had to jump through hoops in order to get mine and stuff, so I can only imagine. We only have a little bit of time left on here. Is there anything that you want to share, with our audience tonight? Is there anything that you would like to plug or anything you'd like to promote about yourself?
uh,
This
um,
interview's over.
um, play Grand Blue Fantasy Versus. It's a good ass game.
That's fair.
The whole team worked really hard on it. I know it's a year and a half old at this point. Also, I guess follow me on Twitter, Maximillionaire. I have an announcement actually for a game that I worked on basically over the entire pandemic,
Ooh.
and yeah, it's coming out in about a week, I think. Actually, I'll be making an announcement on Twitter about it that I love.
Is it
It's
getting
another game that I'm credited in.
is it getting a Western release?
Yeah, yeah, that's what it is. The Japanese version's already out.
Okay.
And
Okay.
yeah, and so once the English version comes out, I'll get to talk about it. But yeah, follow me on Twitch, Sheik and SRK.
Yeah, for sure. Like I told I had another guest who also streams from Japan, and I said I feel guilty because I always miss out on the Japanese stream sometimes because I'm either in the meeting or I'm sleeping or it's late or something like that. But yeah, please definitely follow him. He does some good Guilty Gear stuff and just some fun all around. So I guess that was a shorter plug. That was a shorter plug that I than I thought. That have you met anybody famous? Have you ever run into any like we talked about voice actors, but have you ever run into any like famous like developers or producers of games?
Yeah,
Or any
sorry, I just thought of a really funny
or any
story.
stories you can share? Yeah, please. If we go over, it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, Hinkari, appreciate the follow. Um, yeah, like I said, this industry is a lot smaller than one might think. Like everyone kind of knows everyone, and like
Hmm.
people collab with each other and a lot of things. And I think at this point, it's kind of not really like in the 90s where everyone's kind of really kind of compete against each other for a piece of the pie. Everyone's kind of this like, all right, console game is kind of dying, we need to work together. And so
Right.
there's a lot more collabs and stuff. And so yeah, I mean, I already work with, if you know where I work, and I already work kind of close with a pretty famous ish Japanese producer. But also just like at industry events and stuff, you'll run into people,
That's cool.
and I guess like some voice actors too will be in and out of our office, and sometimes I'll be like, "Ooh, that's so and so from so and so," but I can't say who on stream. But
No, no, I
yeah,
gotcha.
some
I
famous
gotcha.
Japanese voice actors will definitely show up from time to time, and I've also had the opportunity to go to LA and work with some really prominent English voice actors as well in
Oh, cool.
person,
That's
instead
cool.
of just working with them remotely from Japan. And one thing I will say is that before I started this job, I was really, I was really kind of a bit of a weeb, if you will. And
If
I
you
would be
will,
like,
okay.
a weeb, if you will. And I'd be like, yo, Japanese voices only. I'm never gonna play this game in English. Ew, gross. Ugh.
Mm,
But now that I actually, it's really ironic because now I actually work in that industry in dubbing games into English, and kind of after working in it for a few years now, I've gone from kind of tolerating it to really respecting the amount of work and talent that goes into these to dubbing these games too. Sometimes actually now preferring it over the original Japanese.
really?
Yeah, like for example, I'm playing a lot of Guilty Gear Strive recently, and I'm
Mm,
playing it in English, which is something that if you told my teenage self, he
mm.
would he wouldn't believe it. He'd be like, "You doing what?" Uh, but
He runs away. He's like, I can't grow up. I become everything I hate.
right. I mean, yeah, basically. Yeah, that, and like, I work in I do like some esports events too. Not so much because of not so much now because of the pandemic, but
Mm,
I used to be very anti esports and like no homegrown, grassroots tournaments only.
mm.
But now I'm behind the scenes on these huge esports things, and it's
That's
like, oh,
cool.
there's a lot of work and a lot goes into making these events happen, and so I've kind of grown to respect that as well.
Mm.
And so, yeah, you get to see a lot of things that kind of helped me, I guess, grow as a gamer, if you will.
If you will. No, I like that. I really like that. Sometimes we have to grow, and, as when we're younger, we don't have that foresight. It's a sign of growing up. I like that. So, I know there's a lot of people in chat, and I know there's a lot of people in general. And I ask this of everyone I talk to who is overseas. Do you think things are going to get better in Japan? Like, do you think tourism is going to open up relatively soon-ish? For people to come in and visit these places and to see these sites and things like that.
You know what? I couldn't tell you at this point. It's
I know the numbers are like bad right
yeah,
now.
the
Yeah.
numbers are pretty bad right now, and they don't seem like they're getting better anytime soon. But fingers crossed, like that. It gets better. Numbers go down. People get vaccinated or put on their masks or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully we can get back to normal as soon as possible. But it's not looking like anytime soon, unfortunately. But the sooner the better. And um, yeah, well, I mean, I guess we'll just see. Yeah,
Fair enough.
here's the hoping.
I know I saw because I saw the numbers and it was like I'm like more than India. I live in Indiana and Indiana isn't the worst, but it's not exactly the most stellar state for like vaccination and stuff. They're like the numbers are higher than Indiana. I'm like higher than Indiana. I'm like higher than Indiana. I'm like how how is this possible? How is this possible? But okay, one more question before I let you go. And I forgot to
Sure.
ask this question actually, and I asked this of everybody. You're on an island and you have power, but it's only to like play games. So like if you had to choose like maybe three games that like define you or three games that you feel like would keep you content or three games that have really kind of allowed you to really grow within your passions, like what are they? And if you have a little explanation, why? Or
Ooh.
even if you just have one is fine too.
All right. Well, can I answer this question twice?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Well, games that kind of really defined who I am now as a gamer, I would go back and say Street Fighter 2,
Mm.
Final Fantasy 7, and Diablo 2.
D2. All right.
And so these games really took a hold of me during my formative years, and also I'm gonna cheat here and add another game, Dance Dance Revolution.
DDR. Right.
All right, and so those four games really kind of established who I am as a gamer,
Mm-hmm.
and they had a huge impact on what types of games I would grow to like, and to this day and play. But if I had to choose games to play on an island for the rest of my life, I would definitely not choose those titles.
You're just
I would.
dancing by yourself on an island.
I mean, actually, you know what? Dance Dance Revolution, maybe for sure,
All right.
but I'm not sure about like Street Fighter 2 or Final Fantasy 7.
Hmm.
But let's see. Games I could just play forever. You know what? I would say Puyo Puyo, Tetris. Probably I can because that's kind of a two for one whammy right there. I get Tetris and Puyo Puyo,
Yeah.
and so that's definitely one game I could see myself
That's fair.
playing
It
for a
counts.
really really long time.
It counts. Yeah.
Um, hmm. On top of that, ah, this is a hard question. Games on an island. Yeah, definitely a fighting game. But you know what? Probably Street Fighter 3 Third Strike. That game has so much
Gotcha.
depth. I could play it forever.
That
Um,
depth of an
yeah,
ocean. Yeah, for sure.
yeah. And hmm, magical drop. Yeah, what's up, coffees and doodles? Magical drop 2. Actually, maybe. I mean, I don't know. I already said Puyo Puyo Tetris, and that's my puzzle game. Warriors Woods. So many puzzle
I'm
games.
noticing a pattern here with all these
I mean, puzzle
suggestions.
games
Yeah.
are great. You can play puzzle games forever. That's the thing. Um, I already chose a fighting game, and so I guess a rhythm game. Beat Mania 2DX.
2DX. There you go. I
Yeah.
like DDR and Beatmania shared songs, right? Like, is that a thing, or am I
Oh,
just imagining that? Do they still do
yeah.
that, or
They still do that.
okay, they still do that?
Before it used to be DDR, you used to just take songs from Beatmania and then make DDR versions of them. But now it's kind of they
Gotcha,
just kind of have the same. They share the same pool of songs and artists.
gotcha. Um, makes sense, I suppose. So, well, those are good answers. Actually, I've gotten so many different answers from people. Even I am allowed to say this. One of my guests, they're just like, this is just my job. I don't actually like play games. Like this is just a job, and I go, and at the end of the day, when my job is done, I go home and I do my own thing. Like I don't want to be associated with these games. And I was just like, well, that's okay. We can skip these questions then. Yeah, games are for
Games are
nerds.
for
Games are for nerds,
nerds.
and they're just like, just give
Yeah,
me my paycheck and let me go. Can I go? No. But those are good answers then. So, well, thank you so much for taking the time to come on. I really
absolutely.
appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate everybody who takes the time to come out and come on here. Everybody who came out tonight, thank you so much for coming out. Please follow Sheekin on here on Twitter and on Twitch as well for lots of good entertainment for absolutely free. Um, Feast Varkin, congrats on getting double vax. That's something to celebrate as well,
Yeah,
especially in Japan. I think that's a big deal, right over there. So, um, and yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you for your insight on the gaming industry. We're looking forward to your announcement. Can you say the day when the announcement's coming? Like, do you have a specific day or?
yeah. Give me 1 second, actually.
Yeah.
I think it's August 10th, but let me just double check here.
August 10th. Okay.
Yeah, August 10th, 2021. So in about 9 days.
9 days. Everybody be on the lookout for 9 days. I'll be looking forward to that as well. So thank you so much. Have a good day. Actually, have a good day. Thank you to everybody who came out as well. Take care of yourself, Sheekin. And the announcement for a game that you're involved in correct? Your name's in the
Yeah, a
title
game
as
that
well.
I'm credited.
Right.
But yeah, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun. I love talking about games and stuff. Yeah, so definitely I'd be up to do this again anytime.
All right, let's do it. We might have to get a round table of everybody, except
Yeah.
not the not although the person who doesn't like games, she's amazing, but like I don't think she'd want to be here. She'd be like, yeah, I don't. Next question, please. I don't care. Okay, but have a good day. Thank you for coming out, everybody, and I'll see you guys around. So later, Sheekin. Later, everybody.
All right. Bye.
Bye. All right, we are done. Thank you.